This conference will now
So I
be
started the
recorded.
recording. So basically, I think what I have left out in respiratory system is I didn't discuss about bronchiectasis. I think I told you about history components, the history relevance in respiratory system. Then we saw about the clinical examination components, the methods to examine, the findings in COPD, pleural effusion, lung consolidation, and lung fibrosis. What I did not discuss is regarding the signs of bronchiectasis and the real scenarios in respiratory system. That, if possible, we'll take it on Thursday. So we'll take a call on that because I have not actually discussed the real respiratory system scenarios because they are not full house. They are not classical. So some findings will be in favoring a diagnosis, some will be against a diagnosis. You should know to balance. But I think we'll postpone that class as of now because since we are also not regularly coming to the classes, so maybe we'll take up the outline of cardiovascular system. Okay. So before we go to the cardiovascular system, so at the end of every step, you can raise your questions. So this actually gives you an idea about the position of the areas where you have to auscultate. I'm just giving an understanding of that. The red color round is the place where you auscultate for changes in the mitral valve or abnormality of the mitral valve, or you look for it. And the green round is the left lower sternal edge is for the tricuspid valve. And blue or the navy blue colored round, which is in the left of the sternum, is corresponds to the left second intercostal space, which is for the pulmonary valve. And corresponding to it on the right side, the round one, what you are seeing is for the aortic valve. The yellow one you are seeing is the aortic valve. Now let me open one basic question. See, the valves are actually located behind the sternum. Valves are actually located behind the sternum. But why are the areas distant? Why can't we auscultate on the place where the valves are located itself? Why is that the mitral valve is not located at the place where the red round is there? Mitral valve is very much interior. It's actually all the valves are located behind the sternum. But why do we? So one answer I've got is bone impairs conduction. Okay. Any other reason? Any other reason? Oh, Shruti has told blood flow is in that direction. Flow dynamics of blood. Okay, I think Shruti has given the closest answer. I'll explain it. See, this is the reason for that. You can see that all the valves are located behind the sternum. This red round is the aortic valve. So this purple color ring is the tricuspid valve. So this is the pulmonary valve. This is the mitral valve. So all are located behind. Okay, but if you look very closely, the direction aortic valve goes towards the right second space. Pulmonary ejection goes towards the left second space. Mitral ejection goes towards the apex. Tricuspid actually goes towards the right side. Okay, this is the direction where it goes. But the issue is that this area is the place where the diaphragm is elevated and the liver also will come. So for that reason, though for tricuspid the direction is in this direction, we take the place which is close to that, which is the left lower sternal margin. Okay, so is that point clear? Is that point clear why the areas are different compared to the valves? Okay, so okay, Gitanjali, see, See, I'm not getting, okay, I'll repeat it. See, the valves are located behind the sternum. See the yellow thing. Are you able to see the cursor moving? Are you able to see the cursor moving? Okay. See, the yellow one is the mitral valve. Yellow one is the mitral valve. So mitral valve turbulence is directed towards the apex. Okay. This is the location of the pulmonary valve, which is behind the sternum. The direction is located towards the left second space. Then the red one is the place of the aortic valve, that is going towards the right second space. Okay. Now tricuspid valve, as I told you, it goes towards the right side. This is the direction tricuspid valve goes. But the problem is, here you will have the diaphragm and the liver also. So we auscultate in the left lower sternal margin, where we reasonably get a similar finding. Is it clear now? Geetanjali, did you understand? Geetanjali. Okay, fine. So now we'll move on with the. So this is to just to give you an idea about what are the areas you get in the cardiovascular system examination. Okay. Now I'll go through the what you need to actually look at the inspection. So one by one I'll tell, then I'll come back and discuss the clinical relevance also. Now some of this we have already discussed in the respiratory system. The shape of the chest. It told that you have to see through the shoulder. You look for the anterior-posterior diameter and the transverse diameter. So why is shape of the chest important in cardiovascular system? Why is the shape of the chest important in cardiovascular system? Respiratory system, we had its own explanation. In cardiovascular system, why is the shape of the chest important? Alan G has mentioned cor pulmonale, congenital malformation. No, think basic. Think basic. Think extremely basic. Something when, I'll say, let's assume that when the, I'll just give you an example. If the AP diameter increases, like how you get in emphysema. So what impact it can have in the examination of the heart? I've given you an example. AP diameter increases, decreased sounds, very good. Something more basic on inspection and palpation, can it prevent you? Apex not seen, very good. So Smriti, Pranav and all have put the, so like that there are many reasons there. So that is the relevance of the shape of the chest. Okay. So next is the symmetry of the chest. So symmetry of the chest, again you see from the front and the back, when the symmetry changes due to lung reasons or due to the bone reason, then the position of the heart can vary. Okay. So next you need to look at the sternal deformity. If the sternum is depressed or if the sternum is actually projected out. Now this should be seen from the bed end. Okay, basically this is sometimes mild kind of a sternal deformity can have implications in the diagnosis. So that is why we have to see from the foot end. Reason you are seeing from the foot end is basically you are looking at giving a kind of a tangential kind of a inspection. That is why you are seeing from the foot end. Next is kyphosis or scoliosis. Okay, so why we are looking at the, see, sternal deformity can be a consequence of cardiac problem also. Okay, so which cardiac condition can cause sternal deformity, like precordial bulge? Which cardiac condition can lead on to, Smriti has put hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, right ventricular hypertrophy when do all patients with right ventricular hypertrophy develop a sternal deformity? Right ventricular hypertrophy is the correct answer, but when? In early age. Very good. So Satvik has put that. So in children, see, generally when there is a tetralogy of Fallot, which is not causing much of a symptom, so over a period of time, the precordium will be soft. It will be cartilaginous in neonates and infants. So since the right ventricular hypertrophy keeps on increasing, then they will develop a precordial bulge. So it is a clue towards underlying congenital heart disease affecting the right ventricle, causing right ventricular hypertrophy. Now, the other way is also possible. For example, when there is a sternal deformity, it can cause some abnormal cardiac findings also. I'll give you an example. In pectus excavatum, when the sternal deformity is, when the sternum is depressed, sternum is pushed inside, what effect it can have in the examination of the heart? When the sternum is pushed inside, what effect it will? Sternum is pushed inside. Sternum is pushed inside. So what effect it will cause on the heart? Smriti has put auscultatory areas will change, decreased contractility. Very good. Displaced apex. So the apex will be displaced laterally because the sternum will press, and therefore the apex will be displaced laterally, and it can also compress the anterior part of the heart. Therefore, some kind of a murmur may be heard in the pulmonary region. So sternal depression can cause certain abnormal cardiac findings on examination. Okay. Now kyphosis and scoliosis. Okay. So what is the relevance of kyphosis and scoliosis? How will kyphosis and scoliosis affect your cardiac examination? How will kyphosis and scoliosis affect your cardiac examination? Position of the heart. Smriti has put position of the heart. Roshni is telling kyphosis pushes the heart forward. Very good. So kyphosis, I will tell you the commonest thing, senile kyphosis. So in older individual, the spine will bend forward. So when the spine bends forward, what happens? The heart comes little backward. When this goes forward, the heart comes little backward. Therefore, you may not be able to see the apical impulse. That is the impact of a kyphosis. When scoliosis occurs, there may be gross displacement of the heart. Heart may tilt towards the left, heart may tilt towards the right, heart may rotate anti-clockwise or clockwise. So those are the things which can happen when there is a kyphosis and scoliosis. Okay. Now the first four things: shape of the chest, symmetry of the chest, sternal deformity, kyphosis and scoliosis. We have already discussed it under respiratory system. Now, is it clear why these things are important in cardiovascular system? The first four things: shape of the chest, symmetry of the chest, sternal deformity, kyphosis. Is it clear why it is important in the cardiovascular system? Okay. Now, tracheal position also, the reason is the same. Okay. The reason why you are looking at tracheal position is again the same as above. For example, if there is a right lung fibrosis, the heart could be shifted more medially. Okay, so the first 4 + 1 5 points, it is very much relevant for the. Okay, so now going for the apical impulse. Okay, okay. Now apical impulse, how you have to look at is you have to eliminate the apex tangentially. You know where is the apical impulse? Where is the usual place of apical impulse? Where is the usual place of apical impulse? Okay, left fifth intercostal space, just medial to the midclavicular line. It is not on the midclavicular line. Okay, left fifth space, just medial. Okay, you can tell half inch, but you just remember medial to the midclavicular line. It should not be on the midclavicular line. Now, why is that I am asking to eliminate the apical impulse? Never look at the apical impulse in the without any illumination. Why is illumination very important? Why should you hit a torch tangentially on the place and look for it? Distinguish between to visualize pulse. Haridev has put pulsations are better seen in illumination. See, basically any movement which is perpendicular to the surface of the anything, it can be skin. Okay, any movement which is perpendicular to the surface of the skin, you have to look at with illumination. Okay, for example, jugular venous pulse. Again, you use illumination because they are faint pulsation which may be missed. Carotid pulsations not always requires illumination because it is obviously seen. So apical impulse are relatively faint pulsation. JVPs when minimally elevated can also be a faint pulsation. So that is why you have to eliminate tangentially. Now coming to the position. Okay, apical impulse position. How will you position the patient when you look for apical impulse? How will you position the patient when you look for apical impulse? Now, when you look at the position alone, position just the position of the apical impulse. So some answer is supine, some have put sitting and left lateral. Smriti has put supine or sitting. Anusia has put supine. Harini has put left lateral. Okay, think little bit. I'll give you a clue. Apical impulse can be sometimes hidden behind the rib. Apical impulse can be sometimes hidden behind the rib. So that will give you a clue about how should you position the patient to look at the apical impulse. I have given you the clue. Apical impulse can be hidden behind the rib. Okay. Okay, I'll give the answer. I'm not getting the answer. See, basically, let's assume that the patient is supine position. Patient is in supine position. When the patient is in supine position, the apical impulse is behind the rib. Okay, understand the picture. Patient is supine position, the apical impulse is behind the rib. Where will the apical impulse move when the patient sits up a little bit? The patient sits up or semi-recumbent, 45 degree or 90 degree. What will happen to the apical impulse? So when supine, the apical impulse is behind the rib. So the patient has raised to 45 degree or it comes down. So it comes out of the rib. It comes down. So when it comes down, you will be able to feel it. So apical impulse, by default, what you do is inspect for the apical impulse in the supine position. Okay. If you are able to make out the apical impulses, you note it down. In case if the patient you are not able to make out the apical impulse in the supine position, make the position to what is called semi-recumbent. Semi-recumbent is around 30 to 45 degree. Okay, so that is you can put two pillows or you can raise little bit. So that is called semi-recumbent. Now, if you are able to see even in that position, then make the patient sit up. Okay, so you have to vary the position from supine, semi-recumbent and sitting, but generally we assess at two positions, supine and semi-recumbent. So is it clear now why apical impulse should be assessed in supine? If you are not able to appreciate in the supine position, then you have to make the patient little elevated and then see again in semi-recumbent. Do you understand how to position the patient to inspect for apical impulse? Okay, so now we'll move to the next thing, which is observation for pulsation. Semi-recumbent. Yes, I said semi-recumbent. Smriti, I told semi-recumbent is just above the supine position. So then you need to see, after you look at the apical impulse, you have to look if there is any evidence of movement of the heart. Okay, when the heart moves abnormally, it will transmit the movement to the chest wall. So the next point what I mentioned there, observe for epigastric left, right parasternal, suprasternal pulsation using illumination properly. Okay. Now, so what you need to look at is, you see the pulsation in the epigastric region, again illuminate tangentially, see the right parasternal region, see the left parasternal region, see the suprasternal region for pulsation. So this will give you some clue to underlying cardiac pathology. Okay. Now epigastric pulsation, what could that indicate? Epigastric, if you see a pulsation in the epigastric region, what it could indicate? Now, I think most of you have put aortic, but think from the heart angle. Epigastric pulsation with reference to heart, proper heart. Yes, Chandni has put right ventricular hypertrophy. Very good. So most common thing primarily attributable to the heart is right ventricular hypertrophy and dilatation. Okay. Now we'll move to the second one, left parasternal region. You have the left parasternal region. So lower left parasternal region, pulsations are there. What could that tell you? Left lower sternal region pulsation. No, left axis deviation, no. Most of you have put left ventricular hypertrophy. No, I don't want the diagnosis, the problem, defect in the structure. Left atrial, okay. Okay, I'll give you the answer. See, left, I'll tell you the common things. There are a lot of variations. Left lower part of the, so you have the left parasternal region. Chandani has asked, why can't it be RVH? Very good. So epigastric pulsation and the left lower parasternal pulsation is often caused by right ventricular hypertrophy. Okay, often caused by right ventricular hypertrophy or dilatation. One more you can remember there is when there is lot of blood going through the septum, like ventriculoseptal defect. When there is a large ventriculoseptal defect, you will have the blood going from the left ventricle to the right ventricle. That can also produce pulsation in the left lower part of the parasternal region. Okay. Now going to the left upper part of the parasternal region. Left parasternal region, but the upper part, maybe the second space, third space. So pulsations there, what does it indicate? Pulsations in the left parasternal region, but upper part. What could that indicate? Left atrium. Okay. Left atrial dilatation. I'll come back to left atrial dilatation. Left atrial dilatation causes an indirect pulsation. I'll come back to that. See, left atrial dilatation will by itself does not cause any pulsation. Left atrial pulsation only when it is associated with right ventricular hypertrophy. Left atrial will lift the right ventricle and then it will cause pulsation through the right ventricle. So it's not isolated left atrial enlargement will not cause any pulsation. Okay. So I'll come to the answer. So left upper part, dilatation of the pulmonary root. Main thing you have to remember is dilatation of the pulmonary root or increased flow or resistance in the pulmonary valve. Commonest cause is pulmonary hypertension. Any pulmonary hypertension. Any cause for pulmonary hypertension, either a high flow pulmonary hypertension or a resistance dependent pulmonary hypertension Both can cause that. Okay. One more condition which can cause pulsation there is the subpulmonic ventricular septal defect. When the ventricular septal defect is just below the pulmonary valve, then also you can get pulsations there. Okay. Now pulsations on the right side, pulsation on the right parasternal region is quite rare. Okay, remember that pulsations on the right lower parasternal region, right lower parasternal region is quite rare. So right upper parasternal region, when will you get pulsation? Right upper parasternal pulsation, where do you get? Right upper parasternal region, which condition will cause pulsation? Aortic pathology. What aortic pathology? Aortic stenosis. Aortic stenosis is a low volume state. Okay, aortic regurgitation. Very good. Large volume of blood ejected out, because I showed you initially the direction of blood flow is like this. So severe AR can cause pulsation in the right upper parasternal region. Okay. Then the suprasternal region. What causes pulsation in the suprasternal region? Pulsation in the suprasternal region. Okay, very good. Aortic aneurysm can cause, aortic regurgitation can cause, and remember all hyperdynamic states. Anemia can cause, pregnancy can cause, hyperthyroidism can cause. So all high volume states, including aortic regurgitation plus aortic aneurysms, can cause pulsations in the suprasternal region. Okay. Then you look at the status of the skin, like how you already have seen the for the respiratory. It is more for completion. For cardiovascular system, we basically look at only scars. So rest are not that much relevant for the. So with this, we are completing the inspection of the cardiovascular system. Any doubts you have in the inspection of the cardiovascular system before I go to the palpation? Any doubts in the inspection? So basically in the inspection, you are looking at the apex, you are looking at the pulsations in different regions. That's all what you are looking at. Any doubts in the inspection? I'll clarify that before I go on to palpation. Shruti has asked, explain why the left lower pulsation can be connected to RVH. Okay, I'll take the question one by one. See, actually left lower sternal part, what you have is the right ventricle only. Left ventricle, predominant part of the anterior part, just behind the precordium, is the right ventricle. Left ventricle, for example, if this is the right ventricle, left ventricle will be like this. Okay, so it will be like this. So the anterior part is fully the right ventricle only. Okay. Meloni has asked, left atrial dilatation transmits pulsation via RVH. Okay. See, can you tell a condition which is associated with left atrial dilatation and right ventricular hypertrophy? Can you try the condition? Combination of left atrial MS. Yes. So mitral stenosis causes left atrial dilatation and right ventricular hypertrophy. See, what happens is left atrium is fully dilated and the right ventricle is also hypertrophy. So when the left atrium actually attempts to empty, and the left atrium attempts to empty, it will be difficult because the mitral stenosis valve will be there, stenotic valve. So left atrium will not be able to effectively. So the left atrium, what it will do, it will rotate. So the rotation will actually transmit the pulsation to the right ventricle, which is above, which is also hypertrophied, and that will actually lift the parasternal region. So this is one of the reasons why parasternal heave occurs most commonly only in mitral stenosis. In conditions where the left atrium is not enlarged, like in primary pulmonary hypertension, you won't see the parasternal lift. So massive parasternal lift is only seen in when left atrium is enlarged, right ventricle is also enlarged, and the left atrium moves, rotates, and moves the right ventricle above. So this will be the movement. So this will move it. Right ventricle also will move. So this will transmit to the chest wall. So that is why, that is a mechanism for left atrium transmitting the pulsation to the right ventricle. Okay. So then I'll just check if there is any other question. Could you please repeat the causes of, okay. So Sania wants to repeat the causes of suprasternal pulsation. See, suprasternal pulsation is basically occurs in all high volume states. Remember that. Anemia, hyperthyroidism, pregnancy, all high volume states, because the blood going to the aorta will be more. So the aortic arch will be pulsatile. In addition to that, aortic regurgitation also it will be prominent. One more condition you can remember is aortic regurgitation. So just remember all high volume states plus aortic regurgitation. Smriti has asked, explain the concept of right atrial dilation. Now, I didn't talk about right atrial dilatation at all. Right atrial dilatation will be reflected in the JVP. Right atrial dilatation will not cause any abnormal findings in examination. Okay, so I think I'll go to the palpation now. Now, before I go to the palpation, just see this picture. So when you palpate, this is how you have to use the hand. The most part of your hand during palpation will be the distal part of the palm, this part, which is used to actually feel the thrill. The red color is to feel the thrill and palpable sounds. Okay, so the red color, which corresponds to the head of the metacarpal bone, is the place where you have to feel for sounds and thrill. The fingers is used to feel the pulsation, like apical impulse. There is a pulsation which is pulsating. You will put your finger there and you will see whether it is just hitting your finger or is it lifting your finger. Okay, so that is for feeling the pulsation. And the base of the hand is to feel the lift. Okay, so like heave. So this is for heave. This is for thrills and palpable sounds. This is to feel the pulsation. Now, is it clear which part of the hand should be used to assess what? Okay. So now I'll go to the components of palpation. So you will be actually palpating the trachea. So I think this already we have discussed. You will fix the head and you will palpate the trachea. I'm not repeating it because already we have discussed in the respiratory system. Now, palpation of the apex. Okay, there are two parts to that. One is to identify the location of the apical impulse. Another is to study the character. So there are two parts to in the palpation of the apex beat. One is to identify the location. Another is to identify the character. Okay. So now this is to identify the location. So first what you do, you will just keep the hand over the expected place where you will feel. Okay. Now let's assume that when you are keeping your hand like this, you are feeling just follow the cursor. Are you able to see the cursor on the screen? Okay. So let's assume that the individual is feeling the impulse here, something hitting on the finger here. So what you have to do next is you have to use a finger. Use a single finger to localize the apex. So this finger also, so see here, the index finger is kept and apical impulse is localized. Okay. So what you have to do is that this is a method to identify where is the apical impulse localized. Is this part clear? Localization of the apex. First you put your entire hand, then if you feel something below your hand, take a single finger and feel for the apical impulse. Apical impulse is basically the lowermost and outermost part of the cardiac impulse which is felt. Okay, I'm repeating it. Apical impulse is the lowermost and the outermost part of the cardiac impulse which is felt. So is the first part of the palpation of apical impulse clear? Use the entire hand, then use the finger. Okay. So now I'll go to the second part of the palpation of the apical impulse. So second part is to study the character. Okay. So here you are putting the patient in left lateral position. Okay. See what happens to the apical impulse, position of the apical impulse when you put the patient in the left lateral. What happens to the position of the apical impulse when you put the patient in the left lateral? Shifts more to the left. Okay. So now you should not assess it can go behind the ribs also. Agreed. But remember, position of the apical impulse should not be assessed in the left lateral position. Position of the apical impulse should be in the neutral position. So when you put the patient left lateral, two things happens. One, the apex comes more close to the chest wall, and the apex also shifts more laterally. So two things happens. Apex shifts more laterally, and the apex also becomes more close to the chest wall. So we study the type of apex here. Okay, see if the apex is just tapping and it's going. You call it as tapping apex, a firm tap, something like what you feel on the when you keep your hand on one side of the cardboard and when you knock from the other side. That is the tapping. Second one is heaving. Heaving apical impulse will lift your finger. It will lift your finger well, and it will also a sustained lift will be there. A sustained lift of the finger is caused by the heaving apex. Third one is hyperdynamic. Hyperdynamic is easy to identify because when you do inspection itself, you will see apical impulse will be seen in more than one intercostal space. So when you see the apical impulse, the apex is seen in more than one intercostal space. You are, for example, you are seeing the pulsation in the left sixth space and also left fifth space. Both space pulsation is there. Then it is a hyperdynamic. So even without palpation, you can tell that it is a hyperdynamic apex. But when you palpate, you can fine tune and identify two more abnormal apex, which one is the tapping apex, where it will just hit it very firmly. Another is heaving apex, where it will lift your finger and sustain the lift for some time. Okay. Now, is this clear? Is this studying the character technique? Did you understand? So this is something which can be demonstrated only at the bedside, but I'm just trying my level best to explain the procedure. Okay. So first thing you will look at the character. At the same time, when you look for the character of the apex, whether it is tapping or heaving or hyperdynamic, in addition to that, you should also palpate for sounds, whether there is any palpable sound. Okay. Whether there is any thrill. This also you will palpate simultaneously. So when you palpate, when you put the patient in left lateral, three things you have to assess: the character of the apex, any palpable sound, any palpable thrill. Since palpable sound correlates with tapping apex, in the apex we can lessen it to two things: character of the apex and thrill. So you look for character of the apex and thrill when you palpate at left lateral position. So I have added thrill also to the character of the apex when you put the patient in left lateral. Is it clear? Palpation of the apex, localization of the apex, character and thrill. Smriti has asked how to distinguish between thrills and AI means what you mean? AI means see the apical impulse will be a clear it will hit your finger. Thrill will be something like scratching of the finger. It will be like that classical description what is given is purring of a cat. When you hold a cat, when the hat slips along your hand, kind of a scratchy feeling will be felt. So that is, yeah, tapping apex is more or yes, it's a palpable S1. So tapping apex is the palpable S1. Okay. So now I'll go back to the palpation. Thrill will originate from the valve apparatus only. Smriti has asked, where is the thrill originate? It will originate from the, okay. So now going on to the next one. So after the apex is studied, you have to palpate the other regions, which you have already actually done in your inspection. So you will palpate the, so now in all the other region, you are going to palpate the sound, you are going to palpate the thrill. So which part of the hand you will use? All the other regions, aortic region, pulmonary region, tricuspid region, you are going to palpate for palpable sound and thrill. Palpable sound and thrill. Smriti has put pulp of the fingers. Others, what do you feel? Base of the fingers. Okay. I think you have, I'll go back to the earlier slides. See which part is head of the meta. Okay. You mean base of the fingers. Okay, fine. I think you can remember it as, okay, so that is the place you will be looking for. Okay, so why I am telling is because when you palpate other areas, the tricuspid region, the pulmonary area, and the aortic area, the place where you have to use is this part, the base of the fingers or the head of the metatarsus. Remember this. So when you keep your hand, I'll give you one more clue, the same thing which I told in respiratory system. Let's assume this is the chest wall. This is the chest wall. I'm keeping the hand like this. So I will keep it here and I will lift the fingers like this. So I won't mold it like this. I will lift it like this. I will ensure only this part touches. Okay. So did you understand how you have to keep the base of the fingers? Okay. So in all these areas, tricuspid region, pulmonary region, aortic region, you will look for presence of palpable sound and palpable thrill. So palpable sound is more relevant in aortic area and pulmonary area, and thrill is relevant in all the three areas. Okay. Now going to the palpation of parasternal heave. Actually, palpation of parasternal, I could not get a picture there, but I'll just show it to you here. See, palpation of parasternal heave, you can use the base of the palm or the ulnar margin. Okay. So what you are actually palpating is the left parasternal region. So what you do is that you put the base of the palm like this, and press, or you can use the ulnar border of the palm. You will keep like this and you will press. Okay. So you will either use the base of the palm or you will use the ulnar margin of the hand and you will press in the left parasternal region. Okay. This is the technique. Okay, Sarthak. See, for palpating the parasternal heave, you either use the base of the palm or the margin, ulnar margin of the hand. If you use the base of the palm, this is the left sternal margin. So you will keep your hand and you will press. Okay, and see if it is lifting your hand, or you will keep your hand like this and press it and see if it is lifting your hand like this or lifting your hand like this. Is it clear? Palpation for parasternal heave. Okay. So any doubts in the palpation? Any doubts in the palpation so far? Any doubts in the palpation? You can ask now. I'll clarify before I go to the auscultation. Okay. So sorry, I forgot to tell the position. Position is for apex, I told left lateral, tricuspid just supine position. For pulmonary and aortic, sitting and leaning forwards. Sitting and leaning forwards because the pulmonary and the aortic structures come more close to the chest wall. So pulmonary and aortic, it is sitting and leaning forward. For tricuspid, it is just supine. For apex, already I told it is left lateral. Any other doubts in palpation? For thrill, hand should be vertical or horizontal. See, preferably horizontal. Haridev, preferably horizontal. But this is easy. You'll keep like this. You'll keep like this. You'll keep like this. So preferably horizontal. Nothing wrong if you keep vertical. Nothing wrong in keep vertical, but preferably horizontal. Okay. So now I'll go into the auscultation. See, parasternal heave is supine position. Pranav has asked position for parasternal heave. It is supine position. Supine position. Okay. Now auscultation is something which you need to really do very systematic. Okay. Now when you auscultate, when you see the position for auscultation is the same as palpation. For mitral, it is left lateral position. For tricuspid, it is supine position. For pulmonary and aortic, it is sitting and leaning forward. Now, when you auscultate, let's assume you auscultate the mitral area, and I'm just giving you an example. And you are hearing a murmur. You are auscultating the mitral area in the left lateral position, and you are hearing a murmur. Okay, what is the first thing you will do when you hear a murmur? When you hear a murmur, what is the first thing you will do? I've given you a scenario. Time with carotid. Correlate with the heart sound. Sight. Okay, Ashwin has put see if S1 and S2 can be heard. Okay. See, how many of you, the first thing, how many of you have heard a murmur in your up to your 7th semester? How many of you have heard a murmur? Okay. See, when you hear a murmur, the first thing which will come to your mind will be a panic. Something I'm hearing. Oh, I have to find out what it is. Okay. So first thing what you will get will be panic when you hear the murmur. But remember, when you first hear the murmur, you should take your concentration off the murmur. You should never concentrate on the murmur when you hear a murmur. You have to concentrate on the sounds. You have to, what is the sound I am hearing? Don't concentrate on the murmur. If you start concentrating on the murmur, you will miss the finding. So once the murmur is heard, just ignore the murmur. Try to concentrate on the sound. Okay. So identify the sound. Why is it important to identify the sound is because only when you identify the sound, you can time the murmur. Okay, when you hear a murmur in a particular site, the first thing is timing. So to time, you have to identify the sound first. So you should be able to selectively concentrate on sounds when you are auscultating, because when you auscultate, you will hear a sound, you may hear a click, you may hear a murmur. Okay, so first thing you should do is do not concentrate on the murmur, but concentrate on the sound. Okay, so that is why I put, you can see there, see whether S1 and S2 is heard. See if S1 and S2 is heard, and if S1 and S2 is of normal intensity or not. Okay, so first thing you have to concentrate is the S1 and S2 heard, are they normal? So is S1 muffled or S2 muffled, or S1 loud or S2 loud? That is what you have to concentrate first. Okay. Now following this, so I've just put here all the other things which you have to see, like sight, timing, pitch, description, grade, conduction, position of the patient, all these things. But remember, what is, I'll just take out the less relevant things at an undergraduate level. Okay. Now how long you usually auscultate to identify the murmur? How long you auscultate to identify the murmur? As a beginner, how long you have to auscultate to study the murmur? No time. Give me time in minutes. Once, 1 minute. Pranav has put 5 minutes. Okay. See, most of the beginners will need at least 5 minutes. Okay. Some have put, I don't think I can do it alone at all. It is really complicated. It takes a long time. Okay. So, what should the patient do when you study with respiration? When you are studying with respiration, what should the patient do? When you are studying the murmur with reference to respiration, what should the patient be doing? No, the patient has to hold the breath. It's not normal breath. Patient has to hold the breath in inspiration or expiration. Okay, we tell it as breath held in expiration, breath held in inspiration. So can a patient hold the breath for 5 minutes? Okay, so don't bother about the phase of respiration. As a beginner, don't bother about the phase of respiration. Okay. Now, how will you know the pitch? How will you know the pitch? Can you tell some natural sounds which have a low pitch? Can you tell some natural sounds which have a low pitch? Sounds which you hear in nature, which has a low pitch. Male voice, okay. Rustling of leaves, okay. Something more classical, something more classical. Whisper, no. Okay. I'll just narrate it. See, when you walk towards the sea, when you walk towards the sea, when will you start hearing the waves? At what distance you will start hearing the waves? You are walking towards the sea. Very good. Around 50 to 100 meters. Okay. So only when you go close, you will appreciate. So low pitch sounds are rough sounds, which are not transmitted for a long distance. And high pitch, classically we know, feminine voice or the sound produced by birds. Okay. So rough sound has a low pitch. So at your level, don't bother about the pitch, because studying the pitch at undergraduate level may be a little difficult. So don't bother about the pitch as of now. Okay. Now rest style, see the black things which I mentioned there is what is important. So now I'll tell you how. So first thing what you will actually appreciate is the sight, because you know where you are keeping the stith. Second is the timing. When you concentrate the sounds and when you simultaneously palpate the carotid, you can know whether it is a systolic murmur or a diastolic murmur. Next thing what you have to appreciate is the description. Okay. Description is like how the murmur behaves between one sound and second sound. For example, I'll give a sample description. Auscultation of the mitral area. Pansystolic murmur is heard. So I'm telling a pansystolic murmur because it's systolic murmur which is heard all through the systole. The murmur starts after the S1 and ends at the S2. Murmur starts at S1, ends at S2. So this is one description. Other one is auscultation of the mitral area. S1 and S2 heard. S1 and S2 of normal intensity. A systolic murmur is heard at the later part of the systole. which starts after the mid systole and ends with S2. Okay, so basically description is how the murmur is heard between the first sound and the second sound. Did you understand what description means? What description of murmur means? How is the murmur heard between the first sound and the second sound? For example, aortic murmur, it will be heard after S1. It will increase in intensity towards the middle of the systole and then decrease in intensity and end before S2. So that is the description of the murmur. Description of the murmur is very, very important. Okay. Now, next thing which is important is conduction. So mitral murmur, where does it conduct? Mitral murmur, where does it conduct? It conducts to the axilla. Very good. So mitral murmur conducts to the axilla. Where does the aortic murmur conduct? Where does the aortic murmur? It conducts to the carotid. Okay. Now, okay. Now, aortic regurgitation murmur, where does it conduct? Aortic regurgitation murmur, especially in the left third intercostal space. Left third intercostal space. Aortic regurgitation murmur. So regurgitation goes from the aortic arch of the aorta into the left ventricle. So where will the murmur conduct? See, second aortic space is the place where you are hearing the murmur. Left third intercostal space. That is called the second aortic space. So in the left second intercostal space, third intercostal space, which is the second aortic area, you are hearing a diastolic murmur. Where will that conduct? Okay, it will be conducted towards the left lower sternal ridge. It will get conducted to the tricuspid region, left lower conducted region. Okay, fine. If you're not able to understand, it's okay. We can take it at a later point of time. So the three places where you have to look for conduction is, one is axilla and from the apex, second is to the carotid from the first aortic area, and diastolic murmurs from the second aortic area can be conducted to the left lower sternal edge. Conduction is again very important because that tells you about the nature of the murmur. Now, grade is, you will know the grade in the palpation itself, isn't it? So when Ashwin has asked me to explain again. Okay, Ashwin, I'll come back to the regurgitation later on. I think I'll answer how to use the carotid to identify. See, systolic murmurs goes along with the carotid. When you feel the carotid pulsation, systolic murmur will be heard. When it will not match the carotid pulsation when it is diastolic. Systolic murmur will go with the carotids. Diastolic murmur will not go with the carotid. Ashwin, what is it you wanted me to explain? The conduction of the diastolic murmur. Am I right? Conduction of the diastolic murmur. Am I right? No, I'll take it later part. I need some diagrams for that. We'll take it at a later point of time. Just now you remember only carotid conduction and the axilla conduction. Okay. Now, okay, rest all you can actually easy. Sight you know where you are keeping, which you don't bother as of now. Grade you decide based on presence or absence of thrill. Because once you feel the thrill, it becomes a grade 4. Positioning of the patient, already we know. For mitral murmurs, it is left lateral. Tricuspid, it is supine. Aortic and pulmonary, it is sitting and leaning forwards. Part of the stethoscope, except mitral diastolic murmur, except the diastolic murmur of mitral region, all the other murmurs are heard with the diaphragm. Okay. Phase of respiration, you don't bother. So as of now, you just worry about the sight, timing, description, grade, conduction, position of the patient, part of the stethoscope. Only these things you concentrate in the thing. Is the auscultation part clear? Is the auscultation part clear? I just given an outline. We need to understand auscultation more, and you have to do more at the bedside. So I just given you an outline for auscultation. did you understand at least the important things in auscultation? What is important, what is not important? That's what I want you people to understand. Okay. Now, any doubts? I think with this we have come to the conclusion of components of examination. Components of examination of the cardiovascular system. I think I've also explained most of the techniques. Any doubts you have in the class today, I will clear it. Any doubts? Smriti has asked, only if in auscultate you know diastolic or systolic, should we switch using the bell after that and for all other murmurs? See, generally, even the diastolic murmur can be heard in the, repeat the part of the stethoscope. Okay, see, the part of the stethoscope, see, by default you use only the diaphragm. Don't bother about the bell. Okay, because bell using will be difficult. For mitral murmur, the bell is better because it's a rough sound. The diaphragm may sometimes miss it, so that is why we use the, but MDM will also be heard with the diaphragm. For by default you use the diaphragm as the place where you keep. If you hear a rough murmur, then you see whether you can use the bell. Any other doubts in today's class? Okay, so with that, I think I'll close the class today. And see, we have to decide whether, because I have not actually completed respiratory system, the I have not discussed the bronchiectasis, and I've also not discussed the actual real scenarios in examination scenarios respiratory system. We can either take that up in Thursday's class, or we can take up clinical signs of cardiovascular diseases, which I'll put a poll anyway. I'll put a poll on what to decide on Thursday, whether we can take up a examination of the cardiovascular system, that is the signs of mitral stenosis, mitral regurgitation, aortic stenosis, aortic regurgitation, or we can complete the pending which we have already not actually finished in the respiratory system. Anyway, I'll put a poll. We'll see what you people feel, then we'll take a call. So next class will be on Thursday. So I'll stop the recording now.